John Pudner. Okay? So everybody welcome him from Faith and Freedom. Okay? So.
Thank you. I want to mainly focus on our top issue, which is stopping ActBlue.
Sorry.
That's Wisconsin Faith and Freedom's top issue. I'll try to intro it with a couple other things, but let me tell you something. If we had a conservative system set up and suddenly put hundreds of millions of dollars into liberal causes, and every time someone announced for office, the Republican was told, start calling your friends and ask them for money, and the Democrat right now says, ActBlue will put a bunch of money in your account after you announce, we'd be pretty outraged. I mean, look at what the left has done when Elon Musk has tried to just even the money a little bit. I mean, we still get outspent most places. They're 24/7 trying to vilify him. And yet we've kind of accepted this system that ActBlue has set up. And I just want to give you the history of what a corrupt system it is. So I'll mention a few other things too, but I just want to let you know that's going to be the focus of today's talk, because it's our top issue at Wisconsin Faith and Freedom. I think we finally have a chance to stop it. But first, I want to acknowledge everyone in the room and the speakers in one way or the other. I mean, you've put together, I think, a great program here. And Marinette County, I'm a numbers guy. It was one of the best improvements in the state in April. And by that, I measure that two ways. One, you turned out 40% more people in April than you did 2 years ago in the Supreme Court race. 40% more conservative votes. That's a great number. It was only topped by a couple of counties, and I'll mention a couple of them that did do even a little more, but you're right at the top. And secondly, you switched the margin 6 points. It went from a 22-point win to a 28-point win. So what you're doing here works. So thank you, everyone in the room. That means you've got a well-run party, a well-run conservative group. So thank you to all of you. Of course, I also want to thank all the elected officials, including Congressman Weed. Having spent a lot of my life running campaigns where I did this, it's thankless. We all work hard in campaigns, staff does, volunteer does, but when you're the person on the spotlight, you don't get a break. And so thank you, Congressman Weed, the Assemblyman's here, and everyone else who was mentioned. That's just fantastic, and we've got great candidates going. So thank you all the candidates. Everyone's put their name forward, whether you won or whether you ran for office to turn conservatives out to keep it going for the next person. Just great, and it was nice for Congressman Weed to do this as his birthday party. So I appreciate that. That was great. We also want to really thank Regular Joe. It's an honor to speak after him. And for those of you who are older like me, like my state director Spencer doesn't know what I'm talking about, but there used to be nothing there for the First Amendment outside of the mainstream media. There was nothing. There was no social media. There was no Truth Social, and the only thing we had going was talk radio. It was the first time the First Amendment was brought back alive, and obviously it was the great Rush Limbaugh at the top. But for people like Joe to dedicate themselves to getting the word out there, and that was the first chance we had to have a beachhead, at least have our side of the story told. And for those of you as older as me, you remember this, but when Rush came out, we would plan our lives around that 3 hours he was on the air, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I see a few people nodding, you remember this. If I had business meetings, there was always one that ended at 11 a.m., and one that started at 2 p.m., and they were going to be 3 hours apart, so I could listen to Rush the whole time. So it was the first battle, and the fact that, just think we'd be without Regular Joe every day for a couple hours getting that out there, getting it out. And he's complimented now by other groups, but, I got, because part of our comeback here is how do we get the messaging? How do we have our side of the story told? And so conservative media has grown out of it. I played my little part for a year. One of my mild-mannered guys from my high school in Richmond, Virginia, asked if I'd come in and actually be a sports editor for blogs. I've written some. And anyway, his name was Steve Bannon. I'm not sure what happened to him, but I think he's still in media. But he asked me to start Breitbart Sports. And I said, Steve, why do you want a sports section? I mean, obviously we're talking about changing the culture and all. And this is the kind of mission you have to have when you're going out for media. Steve said to me, and there are lots of F words, but forget that part. Steve said to me, John, you wake up every morning and you go to bed every night making sure more of America knows that ESPN is nothing but a liberal tool of Disney. Great mission statement. So thank you everyone on social media and everyone who in any way talks that way. And I want to also congratulate Canada's election to 8th District Chair. I've always told people, though, the most unpopular job in America is Republican chair, so be nice to them. You know, you elect somebody, and then there's always something they aren't doing perfectly, and it's a volunteer job. So anyway, so thank you all. So I said my main topic will be actblue. There's one other topic I'll talk on, though, and that is the turnout machine that we have found worked, and how I think it can improve things even more next year. Let me tell you, if you're still in that mode, the political consultants are, where we're going to raise a bunch of money, we're going to save it, and a month before the election we're going to do a whole bunch of TV commercials and win, the left is outflanking us. It's not going to work. Yeah, TV is important, but it's not everything. And so the model we've used for years, and that we really brought to Wisconsin last year, just first time for us, is a doors, churches, postcard model. And you have to do it in rural areas too. That's my message. So many politicians say, well, we can't do it in the rural area. We can't do a big door-to-door campaign. It's easy to figure out if you're in outside a city or a conservative area, great. You bring in 150 door knockers, they knock on doors. It's a marathon in the rural area, but it's well worth it because it's not expensive, it's intensive. It takes a sustained effort over time. And this has worked many times. And so I just wanted to, what we were asked to do, we really felt like we had success doing this during Trump's election here. We got out, we'd identified a couple 100,000 faith-based conservative voters go to church, did not vote in 2020, and that was our focus. Get to their churches with literature. We put up comparison pieces that can go into churches. That's one advantage we have, and find their doors and hit them. Of course, there are many groups, different things, but that was our angle. And then the other trick is, when you go into a rural area, obviously you may only have 1,000 doors you can really knock, or 2,000, unless you're driving. But you get what you can, and then you take that team you built, and you have them do handwritten postcards to the other people you need to reach. That, you can't drive from farm to farm, but that handwritten touch. And we thought this worked great. We really got a lot of credit. Texas Congressman swears to me, he's told Donald Trump 3 times, like that's what won the state, but don't say that. 8 other groups we did other great things. But it's that method. And the reason I know it worked is I've done it for 20-some years. I was at Marquette. I went back south. As I've told people, my wife was from Wisconsin. My only qualification to be a husband was that I could get her out of the snow. She really had one mission for me. So we went south, and I lived in 3 different states where the Democrats had a 2-to-1 edge. And every state I went in, I ran legislative races. We were outspent, usually about 200,000, 20,000 back then. The money wasn't there. And we took over every state before I moved to the next one. It was Virginia, then Georgia, then Alabama. Fun fact, when we elected the Georgia governor, Georgia was the last state to elect a Republican governor in history. I guess Hawaii had even done it. We were 50th, so we'd never done it. But we were always outspent. I'm kind of glad I went through those years of running campaigns with no money, because we weren't relying on TV. We didn't have it. We just did this program. Bush 2000 pulled me in to run it in 16 battleground states. And, luckily Florida was one of them. And that was a 500-some vote win. And so this method really works. I think it worked well last year. But now I have a real case, even from this spring, which of course no one's happy about the statewide result. But we were asked in particular to go in a bit west of here, kind of northwest, to hit the upper 7th as opposed to the 8th. That was our assignment because groups were hitting. And we decided to go in, do this, hit doors, Ashland County, Bayfield County. These are not Republican strongholds for those of you who don't look at your maps. These are tough areas. So we went in, we hit every door we can, and then we did the rest of the program. While our canvassers were in, you want to learn the community. You went out, you go to churches, etc. So those were our experiments. Let's try these 2 blue counties. Let's do them first. Ashland and Bayfield are 2 of the only counties that outperformed even here. This was a great performance. Ashland improved 10 points from the last April to this one. And we were like, that's validation. Bayfield, we only did half of it before we moved on. I said, let's get people down to Wausau with more doors. We improved 7 points there, one of only 5. The turnout of conservatives in Ashland went up 51%, highest in the state. I'm just talking April to April now. And the only thing I'm kicking myself on, I want to say the real credit that goes to Spencer Laverty, our state director, sitting here in the middle. If you had a chance to talk to him, Spencer was the one who had to make sure they were knocking, get things on church, and no, don't let up. He kept them going. And by the way, I don't want to have a door-to-door face-off because Dixon's just gotten engaged. He doesn't need a challenge. But Spencer did one day, hit 501 doors, which I still, in my 30 years of record, and I'm very upset. I hit like 87 that day. I'm old, I have prickly legs. He was on a bicycle though. So I don't know, Dixon, if you want to adapt that anywhere. I've seen the scooters, I've seen the doors. Maybe you two can just knock off the state together next year. But the program works so well in Ashland and Bayfield. And the one thing I'm kicking myself on is I then said, well, let's get to Wausau. Let's start hitting Marathon County. Let's just get in a bigger place. I wish I'd gone county by county. The person who did it, who ran that team for us, Holly Plutarnik, who's great. She had done Ron Johnson before. She really wanted, I think Spence wanted to, let's just keep going county at a time. It takes 2 or 3 days to hit the doors, the churches. Let's move to the next county. I'm wishing I'd done that. Now, I'd be very upset myself if it was a 1-point loss, because I think we could round up an extra 80,000 votes. But we need that kind of program. And I think the good thing is, our side has caught on that this is what it takes, that you need. Again, it's intensive, it's not expensive. I mean, the money to do this, you're paying people, first of all. I like paying conservatives to do this, because maybe someone has a job waiter or whatever, DoorDash it. But hey, if you want me to knock doors, I'm a great door knocker. That's what we want. So we really want to do that, and I think we've got some buy-in that this is the thing to build, to get field directors out there working it. Because let me tell you what the other side's doing. Souls to the Polls does this in Milwaukee to turn out liberal votes. It's one of the big ones there. For their webpage, their head reverend, I don't remember his name, but it says, the most important day is the day after the election. Learn from your opponents. These are year-round campaigns for them. And we all have, you have family, you have jobs, everything else, but this is a slow burn. This is just something we want to do a little bit, and as Joe has talked about, you want to do something here, this is it. So we're going to really be trying to implement that throughout the year. We want to know ahead of time which churches will take our literature, because our literature is C3 compliant. It's allowed to go into churches. It gives both candidates with a picture, it gives 7, 8, 9 issues, how they stand on each one, it's all footnoted. There's nothing in there that says vote for Trump or whoever. Now, if you read all 8 of those issues and you think, I really do think there are 47 genders, and I'm on Hamas's side, and I'd really like an open border, hey, you've got a candidate. My guess is not many people are going to give it to when they really focus on the issues are going that way. But because it never says vote for, churches can use it. But you can see how this can take some time to kind of explain this, someone in the church understand, no, this is legitimate, you can use it, it is turnout, but we don't say who to vote for. So that's just a tool we want to use. I know Dixon is very nice. They obviously, Turning Point and others have great operations too, but he's found a couple places where he thought our piece worked really well. So, they're different pieces, different groups part out, they're all great. But this is just church particular, that's an effective one. So that's the program we want to add. I've gotten calls from other states saying we want to run that program because there's been a little documentation down in Ashland, but can you come do it in our state this year due to an election going on? So, we may even do that, but what we really want to do is build a sustainable effort for Wisconsin Faith and Freedom, and we'd love to have you on the list. If you're not already getting our emails, then you've done a good job avoiding us, because we really try to keep everyone up to date with emails, what we're doing, and let you sign up. With that, I will pivot into actblue for the rest of my time. I want to actually give you the quick history of actblue and our 10-year fight against them to understand, and others have certainly jumped in recent years too. But I want you to explain what it is, because nothing's more frustrating than you announce for office, and like I said at the beginning, you're told, hey, you're going to have to call everyone you've ever known in your life and ask them for a check. It's really humiliating. You want to save the world as an elected official, and the first thing you got to be is a telemarketer to call all your friends and bug them for money. And then your opponent suddenly has $30,000 in actblue contributions after they announce. Let me tell you how we got to this point, why we finally have a chance to stop it, why I think it's our top priority at the state and federal level. In 2004, actblue was formed. It seemed like a really bad idea, even on the face of it. It was going to be a pass-through PAC. It was going to put out to raise money and then funnel it out to all these other liberal causes. The Federal Elections Commission signed off on it, so there's one caveat: you have to report every contribution, even if it's $1. Okay, so that way we can see where you're moving money. This system got so bad so fast that back in 2008, some of the mainstream press, as late as 2008, was still doing some actual investigative reporting. Even the Washington Post, it was the one who documented how bad actblue was. Now, once there was Trump derangement system, none of these groups will do it. But they actually did an investigation, and among the donors they found going through actblue was a retired school teacher in Missouri who'd given $170,000 to Obama's campaign. This was directly a campaign. Federal limit was $2,300 or whatever. And they went to her. This was really the first Smurf identified. There's been lots of work since then. But they went there and said, the law is $2,300. You can't give $170,000. She said, where do you think I got $170,000? I'm a retired teacher. It was a programmer using her name, because actblue was the one system set up that not only didn't insist on checking all the things you give in your credit card search, address, the CVV on the back, all those things to do to make sure you really are the person you are. They actually told their processors they could not be a processor unless they did not ask for the CVV at all. It was an invitation to flood money in. So actblue, so what did a programmer do? Well, they were giving $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 contributions on a program through this lady, not realizing that the FEC does have to get the cumulative report. Well, they had $170,000, and then no one could track down where the money was really from. The Obama campaign actually sent it to charity. They didn't have anyone to return it to. No one knew where the money was from. So the Washington Post gave us our first evidence of how bad this system was. Several years later, a good friend who was a chair of mine, Peter Schweitzer, some of you may have heard, he's written a couple of nice books, Clinton Cash, that really documented the way they ran money, and some others, but Schweitzer's really an investigative guy. Clinton Cash was actually first on the bestseller list years ago. So he nailed this down. So Peter and I said, we got to figure this thing out. How are they, what all are they doing? So we went to some programmers who'd had some banking background and said, if we were coming to you saying, I have $10 million to give to a liberal, I need no fingerprints on it, how do I get it to them? Look at these actblue pages and tell us if that's possible. Are we just dreaming here? Because it seems to us now that billions are moving through the system, that they found a way to beat the system. The programmer didn't just come up with a theory. That night, you went home, and programmers don't sleep if they get on something. He wrote a program that would have done this. Came back to us the next morning and said, I could move your $10 million, $1 million an hour, just on a program I wrote last night, making up American names, not making up, just phone booking them, and sending them through. He said, it's that easy. I did this overnight. Now, do you think the Bank of China has enough programmers to do this? This is child's play. These guys can move billions of dollars. We don't know how much of it's real. Of course, they're legitimate actblue donors too. Sometimes someone goes for a Smurf check and the person says, yeah, I have given a bunch of checks. But a lot of cases they aren't. So this is what we're up against. You've got this tripod of funding the left, and this is a means to the end. I mean, our other issues, of course, are keeping men out of women's sports. So we go down the list. But this is the money that fuels all of those crazy ideas, the one that gives them enough money. And it's really a tripod. There's Soros and the liberal billionaires, there's Planned Parenthood, and then there's actblue. And we're talking billions of dollars. So in 2015, it made so much common sense that you wouldn't want to do this that we even went to some Democrats. And again, for me, the line is really, before Trump was elected, there wasn't quite the true Trump derangement system. You could actually talk to some Democrats in 2015, is my theory. And then they just went crazy in 2016. Just kidding. I mean, if Trump announced tomorrow he hated tariffs, they'd all be for him. It's just whatever he says, they're against. That's how I define Trump derangement syndrome. So, but we actually, believe it or not, went and said, look, this is a terrible system. It may not always be just actblue using it. Hey, what if some conservative group uses it? What if everyone just starts applying in funny money and goes overseas and gets someone to put it through this way because it's so easy? Well, we actually had a sane moment in 2015. We got a bill saying you could no longer process payments this way. It didn't say actblue by name, but it was that actblue would have to change your whole system. And just like if you were taking a credit card payment for a car that you were delivering, you'd actually want to know if it was really the person or not. They had to use the same system that any credit card processor uses. We got this, it made so much common sense. we actually had 30 Democrats sign on to the bill because it was so logical in 2015 to just stop this process. And I said to him, look, I don't know if all $1 billion coming through ActBlue is, how much of that's legit. Maybe 900 million is. Maybe we're stopping 100 million from China. We don't know the amount because it's basically like if I told the sheriff here, hey, you can't prove the murder, and I'm sorry we made the law that you can't check fingerprints or blood samples or anything else. I mean, or eyewitnesses. I mean, this is what you took away all the evidence. And they said, well, Bernie Sanders attacked me by name, saying, look, a solution in search of a problem. You took away all the means to gather the evidence once you said, programmers, you cannot. All you have to do is buy a bunch of gift cards, run American names to them, and they're through. So we got this, we were on the verge of passing it. I won't go into the nightmare in 2015, but the funniest day is my lobbyist for this was old friend Chuck Cunningham, who was the NRA lobbyist for years. Chuck called me one day and said, sit down, you're not going to believe who co-sponsored the Senate version of the bill. I said, okay, what is it? Amy Klobuchar. This thing was so obvious that Klobuchar actually signed on to stop the process, among all these others. Won't go into why things didn't go through in 2015, but again, Trump got elected, everything got, then they wouldn't do anything that was being proposed. So the problem could have been solved then. Fast forward to 2019, we started looking, we wanted to nail them because we said there's so much money moving, but we're seeing my programmer, Matt Brainerd, who did like the J6, Commission Fight Justice for J6, and great data guy, has done my data since 2000, was Trump's original 2016 thing. I said, Matt, we're seeing contributions coming to candidates that aren't showing up in the FEC report, but it's showing up, what's going on here? He went to the FEC. The FEC was actually not the one fudging on this. They said that they have so many billions of dollars coming through, our servers can't handle them. That's why they aren't publicly reported. We literally cannot process the amount of money coming through ActBlue, and of course they're always doing it $10, $15 at a time to try to hide it. So Matt said, can I get the data from you? They literally gave us thumb drives and let us take the data because it's public knowledge. We had to beg some Texas donors to give us enough money just to buy servers big enough to handle the billions of dollars coming through ActBlue, just to get them on a list. But we did it, we went through it, and here's one interesting thing we found and revealed. In 2019, 400 some million dollars, over half of their donors came from people who checked that they were unemployed. So unemployed liberals were giving money to liberals. They had 480 some million dollars laying around while not working a job. So I think it was 3% of Republicans, said they were unemployed who gave. And we went, so we kept this an exclusive. We did Fox News exclusive to keep it quiet. We didn't want to shooting at it. We got it out. And one of the biggest thrills of my life, only time it'll happen, is we got this great report out. We documented everything. Actually, I got on Fox and Friends, and I'm normally a grassroots behind the scenes, so this was, a rare thing. But I get on, they interview me, walk through. We really made it clear. It was a good click. And biggest thrill was President Trump retweeted my story. So that's a once in a lifetime. Sure it'll never happen again. I'm sure he doesn't remember who the schmo was, whose story he retweeted, but it was great. He got it out. Well, of course, from that point on, the Democrats weren't going to sign off on any restraint on this because, again, Trump was for containing bad money or what. But his tweet is funny. I put it on the website a couple times, but it's just liberal money laundering anyone? And then he links to our story and the interview and all. So we got this. So we got it. Of course, Democrats get control. They stall any kind of investigation. But here's the nice part of the story, and the high note I want to end on. With this new Congress, Brian Stile, from obviously south of here, he's the one who's really taken lead. And if you go through it, just Google if you haven't looked at it, he's launched a full investigation of how ActBlue does this. So after 4 years in the wilderness without the White House, we actually have a chance on this. His investigation dug so deep that I think the 7 top people at ActBlue resigned. Yeah, they're on the gun. We're digging at money. I talked to one other person, you would know his name if I mentioned it, I won't mention it, but who had actually apparently bought part of a Chinese bank or something. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He said, yeah, I couldn't figure out why that bank's books weren't balanced. And when I got into the numbers, I realized it was because they were giving money as far back as the Clintons to liberals and wasn't showing up in their books using this process. So that's what we've got here. So for the first time we got an investigation. we're just excited. It's been a 10-year fight. For the last few years while Biden was in, it looked like there was really no hope to it. But again, if we can squeeze out several $billion, or just the part that's not legal, I'm sure some of that money's legal, but just find the money that's coming from China or someone else and squeeze it out, the difference that will make to not have every time, the assemblyman announces for re-elect or we does, oh great, my opponent's already got $40,000 to fight me, it all came through actblue. So that's where we are. So Style is pushing the investigation, and then last week President Trump opened an investigation, the White House announced, so they're now going after it, so we are thrilled. And I should say too, a lot of other people after 2019 did great work in identifying Smurfs, getting people out, blowing the doors, did you give this money, etc. Joe knows some of the friends I'm talking about. One of them has had other disagreements with him, that's fine, but that thing he's been right on. They've gotten the doors and they figured out what are you talking about, I don't give money, like that first lady in the Washington Post story. So this is just such a serious story. And for those of you seen me speak before, I usually tell 30 years of war stories from the campaign trail. I just didn't want to do that today. Lots of fun campaign stories over time. This issue is just a serious moment. If this leg of their tripod of funding keeps up, that's what enables so many of the ridiculous things we're fighting now, is they are funded through this process. So we, for the first time, Spencer and I went through the legislature, went to just about every office on this week, left little literature on this. We think we've got hopefully a sponsor coming out of privileges and election. We want to get it done at the state level too, in addition to Style doing it federally. Sometimes something gets outlawed federally, but then you realize, oh, they can still do that in the state. And the reason this is the perfect moment is they are now so nervous about this investigation with all of them resigning and all, that for the first time, just last couple months, they've started saying, oh, we're actually checking CVVs now. That's fine. I think that, they can stop doing that in 2 months when the investigation ends is the problem. This is just a policy change. So the point is, now's the time to pass this. Now's the time to outlaw it. And we have the added benefit of saying, oh, well, I'm glad you started doing this. We're just going to codify this process so that no one else ever does it again. I know this doesn't have the immediacy of them, trying to have operations on young children and men and women's sports and so many of these issues, the wide open border, what it does. This is just the means to the end. And while it's more boring, I just encourage you all to look at this, to add this to the kind of the things you follow up, because if corrupt money is talking down in D.C., much less in the Capitol, and if they flip the legislature on actblue, loading up on money next year, and they end up getting control of the House and Senate and keeping the governor's mansion, there's nothing left. So I just hope you all will focus again. If this was the other way around, if a conservative group had done this, can you imagine the mainstream media pressure over the last 10 years to end this process? There were Republicans doing it. We're the grassroots party right now. I just hope you encourage everyone, officials on the bills. There's not a bill yet, it's getting going this Assembly, but we just ask you to put this near the top of the list and understand why we're leading with actblue. As important as all the other issues we have on our webpage are, stopping this actblue process is something we have to do to not lose control. Thank you for your time.